Well, there we were, in our minds, flying to New York. It certainly felt like it for a while. It was a very good sound effect. Of course, after a while, the sound of the engines vanished altogether, but we didn't worry about that. We just carried on, enjoying ourselves. Now, the first thing I was shown was the cockpit. We were shown that two at a time. I sat in the engineer's seat. Now, in the cockpit, there are more dials and switches than there are keys on a computer keyboard, as you'll hear. So here I am in the cockpit, sitting in the engineer's seat.
Yeah. I'm in the pilot's seat now, all right?
No, this is the flight engineer's seat.
Oh, flight engineer's seat.
In front of you got hundreds of 350
Good Lord.
knobs, dials, switches.
So I see, yes.
And the panel's all broken down into sections.
Yes.
The panel up to the right, up to the top right, is hydraulics. That does all the flying controls and all the wheels and brakes. The two panels below that, out to the right, is that's it. That's the electrical panel. That's the generating panel. You've got generators on the engines. You've got your 4 generators. Then right in front of you here is the fuel management. There's 13 fuel tanks on Concorde.
13 fuel tanks?
And it carries 95 tons. It's about, 75 tons. It's about 26,000 gallons. And they use the weight of fuel to balance the aircraft. This gentleman here is the busiest chap on the flight.
Is it? Oh, it must have been.
Yes. Just here, give me your hand.
Yes.
There's a hat here. I always say, please don't put it. That hat there is the flight engineer's hat from the very last flight. So it's jammed in between 2 bulkheads.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. And because Concorde, when it goes at Mach 2, it gets so hot it stretches.
Does it?
And where that cap is, you get a gap there of about 1.25 inches. About as thick as your thumb. And what he did on the last flight, he wedged his hat in the gap. Then when it descended for Filton for the last time,
It's jammed.
jammed in there now, yeah. Also, don't try and drag it out.
None at all.
How hot does it get then?
127 degrees centigrade on the nose. All around here is about 97 degrees. You couldn't put your hand on the skin outside, it'd be so hot.
No.
And yet the air temperature outside is minus 57. You know, so there's differential between the temperatures.
It certainly is, isn't it?
Yeah. And and then you got the captain at the front on the left seat and the co-pilots over on the right-hand seat. You got the 3 crew up here. Yeah, so
So the captain's over that side?
no, that's the co-pilot seat.
And the captain on this side?
No, the captain's over here. I sat in another seat, which is the jump seat. This is a training officer seat. When somebody comes along and wants to learn how to fly Concorde, the instructor sits in the seat I'm sat in.
I see.
So you've got 2 at the front, looking out the windows, and you've got the flight engineer here.
Yeah, see?
All right?
Yeah, fine.
This is your forward galley.
Yes.
Just here, they made your tea. There's your teapot.
Oh, lovely.
Made your tea and coffee.
Lovely, yeah.
And cooked your meals on this side in ovens. No microwaves. It was ovens.
Well, after that, we returned to our seats. Next, we were told about the display on Concorde. This showed how high we were flying and what speed we were flying at. It wasn't all working as it should have been, as you'll hear, but it was showing, like, when it showed Mach 2, it meant we were flying at 1,350 miles an hour at a height of about 60,000 feet. So here we are now, and here's a bit about the display on Concorde.
There's a bulkhead at the front of this cabin on which are some what we call digital displays. We do have these displays which operate in the time that you're on board, and they represent a transatlantic flight. There's 4 displays, and they show the airspeed in Mach numbers, which is the German method of measurement, and on the other side of the aircraft they're showing the equivalent speed in miles per hour. At the moment we're showing 1.44 Mach.
Next, we began to ask a few questions about Concorde.
What was the price of a flight to New York? What was the price?
In the latter years, it was somewhere between £6,000 and £8,000 return.
Wow.
In '94, we had a charter flight from Filton. You could fly from London to Bristol for under £200. Your takeoff and your landing was exactly the same as whether it was supersonic or subsonic. Yeah. Then we had a Bay of Biscay flight from here, which is an hour and a half. You You were supersonic for about 12 to 15 minutes, but you had a meal, you had exactly the same sort of treatment, albeit shorter than you would on a transatlantic flight.
How much was that one?
That was £499 in '94. It was much cheaper to travel on a charter flight than it was to travel on the transatlantic.
What height did she go to? How many thousand feet? 26,000?
The cruising altitude varies between 55 and 60,000 feet. That's over 11 miles high.
Yes.
So that's somewhere halfway between here and Weston.
Yeah, well, about twice the height of others.
That's
really.
right.
Yes.
At the moment, as I said, unfortunately, it's 1.7 Mach. You'll have to take my word for it. When it gets to Mach 2, that is 1,350 miles an hour, which is 23 miles a minute. So, in other words, roughly from here to Weston in a minute.
Yeah, lovely.
As I was saying, it takes off with reheat. That is when they spray in the rear of the engine bay. There is a ring of pipes, and they spray neat fuel into the hot gases that come out of the engine, and that gives the flames. Often, a lot of jet airplanes have flames come out the back from time to time. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem. I mean, there could be, but most of the time it's purely because they're using reheat, and it's usually on takeoff. And the benefit is it gives extra thrust to those engines. They're very powerful engines anyway. So we take off at 250 miles an hour, which is about 90 miles an hour faster than any other conventional aircraft. It has a very steep rate of climb, probably about 30 or 40 degrees. And the reheat is shut off once it leaves the airfield to reduce the noise on the ground. It's then switched back on when we get out over the Bristol Channel, and it stays on until we get up to about 1.7 Mach. It's then switched off. Two reasons. With the reheat on, it consumes fuel at a rate of 40 odd tons an hour, and we only carry 92 tons of fuel. And also, after 1.7 Mach, it continues to increase in speed without any additional fuel going in. So the aircraft, a lot of people say, isn't it small, isn't it cramped? In comparison to, obviously, some aircraft, it is, but you've got to bear in mind it was designed specifically for high-speed supersonic flight. So obviously you couldn't have a great big jumbo jet trying to fly at the speed of here.
No.
So you're actually sat in a long pencil-shaped fuselage. It's approximately 9'6" diameter. The original design was for 128 passengers, but the British Airways Concords have only ever flown with 100. I said, we're in the forward cabin of 40 seats. When you came on board, you came in through a door, which is probably about 20 feet, I suppose, from the nose of the aeroplane. You come in, and the nose of the aeroplane would be to your left. We turned right and came in through a series of, there's a toilet and a series of cupboards, basically easy to design, which will have containers for equipment and food. The food that is served on this aeroplane is the equivalent of a 5-star restaurant. It comes on in metal boxes. It's reheated. We didn't have microwaves in the days when this airplane, so there's just hot ovens, and it's presented to you on bone china crockery with silver cutlery and cut glass wine glasses prior to 9/11. After 9/11, it reverted to plastic glasses and cutlery, I believe, but they still use the china.
What's the maximum that is it ever go? Or what could it go?
Well, 1,400 miles an hour, Mach 2.2 is the maximum speed the aircraft can do. The reason for that is, in the original days, they were thinking of a Mach 3 aircraft, and they built two research aircraft, the T-188s, in stainless steel. One of those is still on view at the RAF Cosford Museum in Shropshire. But it was decided, even in those days, back in the 60s, that it was going to be too expensive to build an aircraft of the size this one is in stainless steel. So they amended the design to Mach 2.2. The reason is it's 1,350 miles an hour. Our nose on the aircraft, which is very sharply pointed, gets up to 127 degrees C. The fuselage gets up to 100 degrees C, so consequently it stretches. And in the cockpit there is a lot of instrumentation, but there's a bulkhead, which is like a wall basically, across the aeroplane, and there's a gap appears between the bulkhead and the instrument cabinet of about 6 to 8 inches. And the actual flight engineer's cap on the last flight is jammed in the gap that was there when it was not super.
Seen that. Yeah.
So as I said, that is the criteria. Because it's built of aluminium alloy, they mustn't exceed 130 degrees C. So, as I said, 127 degrees C is the maximum. And actually, at supersonic flight, you can actually feel the warmth on the windows.
Can you, on the windows?
Yes, yeah. You mentioned the windows are small. They are small. They're probably about, I don't know, the actual glass is probably 6 inches, probably about 8 inches by about 6, I would suggest. But obviously, at the altitude that you're at, there isn't a lot to see. You're 20,000 feet above all the other commercial airlines. The only aircraft you might see would be a fighter jet, and the crew would have a G suit and an oxygen mask on, but you'd be sat in your normal clothes like this. Or you might see a Concorde going the opposite way. But the average flight time to New York was 3 hours 20 minutes, 3 hours 40 minutes.
Would the windows be so small, really, because it's a point of weakness?
It is indeed, yeah. It's part of the design. You probably remember that many years ago, the Comet airliner, they lost several mysteriously, and it turned out in the end to be a fracture from the corner of a window. And in those days, aircraft windows were riveted. The windows in this aeroplane are machined from solid lengths of aluminium alloy. So you may not be aware, a lot of aircraft components are machined from solid or forgings to give good strength. And that is the reason why it is a very strongly built aeroplane, this one. It was subjected to a lot of stresses and strains in the actual flight. And as I said, this one's flown nearly 20,000 hours. When we get to 20,000 hours on Concords, they used to go out of service, and they were subject to a complete strip down. All the panels came off, and they checked everything. When it was flying, it was probably the best maintained and safest aircraft flying. As I said, we up to 9/11, it was flying between 80 and 100% full. So it's come up. Our miles per hour has decided to operate now, so we're actually showing it Mach 2, but I think our miles per hour is a little bit wrong. It should be 1,350. Yeah, that's right, yeah. It might catch up. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it varies. minus 56, minus 60 degrees. It's pretty cold up here, you know. It's
Normally on long flights you have a screen in front of you, but of course this wouldn't be long enough for
no. The only entertainment was the food, and you did have music you could listen to with earphones that you could plug into your seat. But as I said, the actual digital display, there was one in each cabin. You're in the forward cabin. When we tell you the rear cabin, we can't take anyone physically into it because it's tail heavy without any fuel on board, and it would tip up.
Oh dear.
But we do have 2 steel rods on the front end of the aeroplane, not only to prevent that happening, but also for movement with the wind. Because at times when it's very windy up here, this aircraft does bounce around. It bounces 3 or 4 inches in either direction.
Lovely. So what's their net weight then?
It's 180 tons fully laden. Yeah.
This is air conditioning and lights, I presume.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's
yes.
right. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, the leading edge of the fin is a composite. It's a aluminium honeycomb, which is like a little triangular shape, and they fill it with foam.
Oh.
Now, you may or may not know that we did lose a few fins on Concorde. It just shows how well designed the aircraft was, because the fin, although it doesn't have if you can visualise, an aeroplane used to have 2 wings, a tailplane and a fin. This one doesn't have a tailplane.
How long did it take for a chap to train to be a pilot?
I'm not certain how long, but I know that they were obviously the top pilots of British Airways, and even though they flew as regular as Concorde pilots, they had a team of Concorde pilots.
I see.
We had a simulator. Well, we had a simulator here, and also there was one at Heathrow, and they used to train on the simulator. Every 6 months they had to go on a refresher course. So irrespective, they were flying for 6 months on Concorde. They still, because obviously there were various modifications used to take place on any aeroplane, and but it was just a question of keeping up to date. We had one lady Concorde pilot, but it was quite a prestige job. I mean, they were the top captains, and as I said. And again, this aeroplane had a flight engineer. You had two pilots, pilot, co-pilot, and a flight engineer in the cockpit. You don't have flight engineers anymore. And there is dozens of instruments in that cockpit. And they're of the electromechanical type as opposed to the digital. That's right, yeah. So the digital age is taking away a lot of those instruments, and a lot of them just have screens. And in fact, the actual pilot's column, operating column, is like a I'll say it's like a bicycle handlebars in a lesser form. It's not as wide as a pair of handlebars, but it's that sort of thing. On the 380, they have like a little joystick. There's like a single little stick, but it's all computer controlled. You see, I mean, basically the pilot sat there and they just look at the dials and. The program flies the aeroplane. Whether that's a good thing or not, I'm old-fashioned, I think.
How many cabin crew did Concorde take?
We had 6.
6 cabin.
Yes, it could vary between male and female, but there was 9 crew in all.
9 crew in all.
Is that what you call fly-by-wire? Is that the
to be honest, this particular aircraft was strictly fly-by-wire because all the flying surfaces. And again, we don't have normally they have ailerons. They have elevons on this aeroplane. There is a subtle difference. I won't go in bore you with all that, but they're actually actuated by hydraulic cylinders. And there's lumps underneath the wing, all like shrouded, where they're housed, and also on the fin. There's one on either side at 2 different levels. And they're operated by electrical signals. So I said this trip probably was one of the first fly-by-wire aeroplanes.
Well, that concludes my little visit to the now flightless bird Concorde. It was interesting. Well, we've come to the end of our programme for the Enfield Microphone 2012. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's my first edition, so I hope I got it right for you. If you have any comments, you can call me, or if you want to put any article on the magazine, you can call me on 0208 805 6578, or email me at keithdejersey, that's all one word, KEITHDEJERSEY, at btinternet.com. Well, with the festive season upon us, I'd like to wish you all a happy Christmas and a happy New Year. And until next time, I'll say bye for now from Keith to Jersey, and thank you very much for listening.